Welcome to the IA on AI podcast, part of the Audit Podcast Network, where we bring you weekly updates on AI from the internal auditor's perspective. Hey, everybody. Today we have Julio Tirado on the show. This might be our most common guest. I think you hold the record now officially for most guest appearances on the podcast. You might be tied with Richard Chambers, so in pretty solid company. And so Julio was, I think you were texting me. You were at the AI4 conference, right?
That's correct.
And you were sending me selfies of some pretty prominent AI leaders in the world and telling me how excited you were. And I went, awesome. I'm not there. So how about you come on for like 15 minutes and tell us what's going on? So with that said, of course, Julio going above and beyond as he always does, put together a couple slides, or not even a couple, maybe like 20 slides in the deck. And from that, there was his top 5 takeaways. And from there, given the time, Julio thought it be best to run with 3 of those. So with all that said, if there's any other context, Julio, you want to provide, feel free to. If not, if you just want to jump into 3 of your 5
Mhm.
takeaways from the conference, that'd be great.
There's one thing to add. I don't think I sent you. I took a picture with a Klingon.
No,
Is that does that ring a bell?
yeah, no, that didn't. I would have saved that one down for sure.
That's next. So in quick summary form, first of all, thank you for having me, Trent. The AI4 conference was it's I think the largest conference in North America that is AI specific, and it's not particularly designed for the audit community. It's for AI practitioners, chief AI officers, people that are more directly first line of business kind of first line of defense type of engagements. And so I gained a very interesting perspective. It was nice to hear from that viewpoint for a change. And so, of the key takeaways that I took out, the first one pertained to agentic AI, which should not be a shocker, right? If I had $1 for every time the word agentic was mentioned, I'd be somewhere on a yacht near a beautiful beach. But the one specific trend across the many sessions that I attended was that agentic AI is changing the risk equation, and you can interpret that in multiple ways. But as an example, I summarize that AI is evolving from systems that generate content to systems that take action. Identity, permissions comes up, governance, orchestration. So there were many talks across various sessions that were slicing and dicing agentic AI from different perspectives, which is very interesting. One thing that stood out to me is, as you probably know, Trent, in the world of technology and cybersecurity, we've heard of this term called shadow IT for many, many years. And that then evolved to this new concern, this new related concern called shadow AI. Well, now I'm hearing the term of shadow agentic AI. And we had one AI leader that specifically mentioned a moment where he was asked, "Well, how many agents do you have in your environment?" And he gave some number, and there was actually a multiple of that overall. And so that's just another derivation of the challenges that we've been facing over time. There was mention about being intentional about using tools to specifically add a layer of orchestration and oversight and management for the agentic AI deployment. Interesting challenges that I came across, the possibility that an agent's identity may change over time or may need to change over time, meaning we have to pay attention to the use case of the agent, the implementation, which is interesting. And when a lot of us think about agentic AI instances, we maybe think of them as additional users or just small bots that are doing certain things. But we had a security guy who mentioned, he said, "You know what? I think of an AI agent as a privileged user from a risk perspective. So I give that as much attention from a uh, identity management perspective as I would a privileged user." So that was particularly curious. Now, I don't know, Trent, because you have a lot of folks that talk about AI and you learn a lot and you follow that industry a whole lot. One thing that was new to me in the space of agentic AI, and this is within the context of vendor management, this idea of tripwires in a provision in an agreement or sort of a stop mechanism is specifically if you're leveraging a third party that offers you the ability to deploy agents in an autonomous way. So, vendor management is big because the vast majority of us in society, we're not building AI models from the ground up. We're leveraging third parties. So vendor management is really critical. And it was mentioned a suggestion that our contracts may want to include some sort of a tripwires or a stop mechanism type of provision in the event said agentic system starts to behave undesirably. So this is just vendor management to the next level, given
Mm.
this newer technology.
Yeah,
What do you think of that? What's been your
well, I think
exposure
vendor
overall?
management's been a huge issue. I mean, pre-AI, that was a huge issue and
Mhm.
something I feel like most people didn't really have their arms around very well. But then obviously, like when AI hit, it was even more so. And it was just kind of like, hey, ask the question, how are you using AI within this tool? And then maybe there's a whole separate set of questions and the questionnaires the vendor had to go through to get there.
Right.
But this tripwire idea makes a lot of sense. And it is I don't know how you do that though. Is there any insight on how you implement that outside of just the concept itself, or is it still kind of like, it's still kind of a new idea and hasn't been fleshed out?
It's in the middle. I mean, this suggestion was made from actual experience, and unfortunately, we didn't dive deeper into that.
Yeah.
But to me, it raises a more important fundamental issue. So what came from the conference was obvious in that the number one issue was that the speed of adoption is increasing, governance is being challenged as a result. So our speed of anything that we do within our organization needs to be challenged. Speaking of vendor management as an example, so any company that has a vendor management program may identify of all the vendors they have to maintain and evaluate. Some of them will be classified as critical risk. Some will be classified as some lower tier risk. And that classification likely determines how frequent the vendor due diligence occurs. Well, given the speed of adoption, given that certain services that we engage, technology services, may upgrade, may change between review one and review two, or review two and review three, we have to ask ourselves, how do we identify these changes so that we can go, okay, the contracts clauses needs to be upgraded. Okay, the risks have been modified. Now we went from this model to that model. We have to revisit this assessment. So it's challenging how often we perform these vendor management reviews.
It's gonna have to be agents governing agents to some degree.
By necessity, what was obvious to me is that the human in the loop is sort of becoming a combination of human plus AI in the loop, or human
Yeah.
plus agentic in the loop. We're
Yeah.
needing to leverage AI to manage AI at the speed of AI
Yeah. With a risk-based approach
with a
on
risk-based
top of that.
approach,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
It's an interesting challenge, and I'm sure there's no perfect answer, but for sure, what's safe to say is what we are doing today can't continue. We definitely have to upgrade.
You mentioned the identity change of an agent is risk mitigation there, basically testing those periodically for when those change as opposed to like, oh, it changed.
That's a good question. So that actually leads to sort of the second takeaway. So that perfect segue. So governance was a key topic. Governance was a key topic all across the board, even for the talks that weren't specifically explicitly about governance. So the second takeaway is that governance has to evolve from traditional policy manual processes to more architecture. And I heard a term that I haven't heard ever. Maybe you have, but it's called governance as code. Does that ring a bell at all? So the idea of governance as code is, I mean, fundamentally, first of all, is that governance, they're wanting, as a general rule, for governance to move in a continuous risk-based way, so that it blends into the system, so that we take governance processes and embed them across the technology stack. I had a guy talk to for sure, for sure, and for now, the conversation is evolving to this is becoming a necessity, certainly for the companies that are much more bleeding edge when it comes to adopting agentic systems and related technologies. So that's the ideal state, which ties back to the original challenge of all the controls that we are adopting within our organizations. We almost have to ask ourselves on a regular basis: are they still well designed? Given the improvement of the technology, given the rate of change that we're now experiencing every single day.
So definitely no more. That's how we did it last year. Like, I mean, that was the I mean, I said that once and they preached that so hard. Never say, if we have a question, like, well, that's how we did it last year. And I said it once and immediately I was just like, oh, that was the worst. And I got grilled pretty hard for it. But for sure, that's going to be pushed even harder now. Like, there's absolutely no way we shouldn't be challenging design of controls. I think I don't know, maybe you agree with this. It seems like we spend significantly more time testing operating effectiveness as opposed to design. And I think we need to come back to like, no, the design is where we need to be hanging around. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember many years ago when I was responsible for fiducia testing, which is the private banking equivalent of Sarbanes-Oxley. Once we made a decision about the design of a control, we really never talked about it,
Uh-huh.
not for a long time. So yeah, this changes the conversation on a regular basis. I know, as you know, we've had this experience of agile auditing and agile mentality being embedded within various engagements. Well, sounds like we need to be, I mean, that sounds kind of cheesy, but we need to be agile all the time,
Yeah.
challenging what we think is the status quo, what we think is the norm, just because things are moving so quickly.
Yeah. All right. What about takeaway 3?
The last one involves, and this I think you'll appreciate because I think one of your guys on the pod mentioned this to some extent, a multimodal strategy,
Uh-huh.
AI not AI model, excuse me, model
Yeah.
strategy
Yeah. Yeah.
becoming more essential.
Yeah.
The idea that companies, as you know, when ChatGPT, as an example, was publicly released November 2022. The uh, the world was excited, at least the world that was not populated by AI researchers was excited. Eventually, we had a few add-ons. We went from Bing Chat to Copilot and so on. So now we have a collection of frontier model products we can all use. So there was a lot of conversation about the fact or the claim that just having a frontier model product as a company isn't enough. As you know, you've heard complaints from other organizations saying that there was this pattern of overspending on tokens on various products, and there's just I heard a lot about people reiterating, listen. Adjust the model to the use case. In certain cases, a small language model might make more sense. In certain cases, an open weights model might make more sense. And the classic use case, which came up a lot of times, is I'm sure you've talked about this with the recent case of OpenAI's AI agent that specifically trained for security purposes in this enclosed, safe sandbox, supposedly secure environment, left OpenAI's networks hacked, eventually Hugging Face. Hugging Face's instant response team responded like they should per their IR plan, as part of that process, they use a frontier model to try to perform incident response, and they were blocked by that model's guardrails in carrying out their procedures. So they use an open weights model from China, from a Chinese company, which would cause a lot of people to pause. From a cybersecurity perspective, how much of that model can you trust? Forget the country; it doesn't matter. The fact that it's from some other jurisdiction. What do we know about potential backdoors? What do we know about anything within that model that could be harmed from a cybersecurity perspective? Just because something's open weights doesn't mean it's open source. So it presents. So now it's interesting to see this change so quickly because whenever you and I talked about AI many moons ago, it was almost exclusively ChatGPT or at least some other frontier model, and that was it. So now we're in this world where we have a portfolio of options to pick from, and it's sort of like with a mutual fund. You diversify your money to reduce the risk. So now we're diversifying our model usage also to reduce the risk.
Like frontier model. And for those that don't know, when we say frontier model, that basically just means like OpenAI, Claude, or so ChatGPT,
Right.
Claude,
Grok and so on. Gemini.
Yeah, yeah. So like the ones basically you hear about in the news
Yeah.
are like the frontier models. So and then open weights you can kind of think of as open source. I know you said that's not the case, but you can kind of think of like effectively you can go download it from the internet, put it on your computer, and use it locally for the most part. You need a lot of hardware or enough to make it work, but
Right.
like kind of for the most part, you can think about it like that. Um, so you do see this is something we've been talking about, and I know it's. I was thinking about this before we got on. It's fun to talk about what could happen, but I don't know if it's how much sense it makes because it's unlikely. Like anybody's guess is like a good guess or like a decent guess at this point. Like, yeah,
It
that could
feels that
happen too.
way.
But
Yeah.
you see it being like for any given organization, like here's our frontier model, and then maybe even within different business units. So like let's just take internal audit. Here's your open weight model for internal audit.
I that does make sense, but I would actually add to that because I do think I mean, what you're sort of inferring is tabletop scenarios and coming up with the hypotheticals of what if can happen. And we have to have these conversations because these technologies are moving so quickly. They're so novel and there's so much we don't know. So I would say something may have a low probability, high impact, or just low probability, low impact. It may be unknown. We still have to talk about these things. But I with the frontier models, what people forget is you pick your product, ChatGPT, Claude, it doesn't matter. they're general purpose. And with general purpose comes the risk that you may experience hallucinations, which is to mean you may have output that's inaccurate, but claiming to be accurate by the LLM, by the large language model. That tends to be a significant concern still for those products. But you're now seeing companies that are specifically building apps, of course, AI powered for certain niches like legal and medicine and so on. So you'll see this transition to these products that will not be as impacted by hallucinations and therefore be more reliable. So if you're using frontier model products like Gemini or Copilot, you still have to exercise a level of professional skepticism. But based on what I heard in the conference, I can see a future where that level of skepticism may mostly go away with certain products that are for certain industries.
Okay. So yeah, future from the conference are saying like, hey, whatever, you have ChatGPT and you're at a bank. Here's your bank ChatGPT instance.
Right. And you have to be very, I mean, that's a great point. So, as a banking institution, we are getting into a position where we're able to pick vendors that are taking what we normally do, fraud detection, you name it, and saying we're taking it to the next level because we're powered by XYZ model. That's already happening for a fact. Now, one thing we have to emphasize, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I mean, I'll specific focus on Copilot because this will drive the message, and because in my estimation, most companies are Microsoft shops. Okay, so when it comes to Copilot for an enterprise, you can divide it into Copilot Chat and Copilot 365. And the Copilot Chat is sort of the less secure implementation. And that's the one you have to be extra careful in terms of access, letting it access data, uploading files, and so on. The 365 Copilot variation, that's the enterprise implementation. That's where a company will leverage the cloud, the enterprise cloud. They'll have a secure, isolated cloud, um, a tenant where company's data, whatever that data is, will be accessible and stored in that cloud environment. And therefore, you can access Copilot in that situation. So the thing a lot of us have to think about and be careful about is it's really easy to press a button, pay the fees, and engage an AI product so that people can do whatever they want to do. But we have to think about this in terms of a triangle. If I can do a quick visualization, imagine a triangle, sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Imagine a triangle with several layers, and we'll say three layers. The horizontal layer at the bottom, we'll call that identity access management. This is ensuring access is appropriate for whatever resource you have, people, agents, whatever. Appropriate access, role-based access, good authentication, logging, and so on. That's the first layer, and we have to make sure that foundation is strong and effective before we get to the second layer, which is data governance. Now we're talking data classification. We're talking data loss prevention. We're talking encryption of the data. That second layer subsequently needs to be in place and effective and reliable as a condition to get to that third layer, which is AI governance. So the topic of responsible AI came up a lot. But as it relates to your commentary on deploying these systems for an organization, as an industry or just as a society, we have to step back before we deploy things within a strategic plan and make sure we have that triangle properly implemented so that we can responsibly leverage whatever AI tools we want to use.
I agree with that, but hardly anybody's gonna do it. Like, we know he's doing it already. I think I've told this before, but there's a really, really big organization, and they were just like, "Hey, data governance team, you're done. We don't need you anymore," and cut them
Yeah,
loose. There's
that's
like 8 to
heartbreaking.
10
I
of them
know.
and let them loose. So,
Was it a
um,
regulated industry like banking or insurance or no?
not that highly regulated, no, but
No.
regulated nonetheless. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I
yeah,
can see with the regulated industries like banks properly implementing the triangle I just mentioned. But you're right; it's really easy to skip to the third layer for sure.
yeah, yeah. No, I think banks, financial services, they've been seemingly from the outside looking in, and somewhat from from people I know. If nothing else, their rollout of, Gen AI tools was extremely slow,
Hmm.
but that was done for a reason, and so they tend to be obviously, because of the amount of regulations, they tend to
Right.
do things seemingly in the better way relative to governance than most other industries, but anyway, with that said, Julio, I know we got, 3 of the 5 takeaways. I don't know if is there anything else, maybe like an overall takeaway that you wanna leave us with, from the conference?
Well, the overall takeaway is quite simple. Things are moving faster than expected. This should not be a surprise. That should be very much predictable. So it's upon all of us, our auditors, compliance, risk, security, business leaders. We have to make it a top priority to stay informed. This is moving way, way too fast. And I am regularly surprised by things that I thought I'm in the loop of, which I am not. So make it a strategic priority. I recommend podcasts. I recommend following influencers online. In that conference, we had Fei Fei Li, Andrew Ng, Jeffrey Hinton, the greats in the world of AI. You follow people like that, you tend to see what's coming your way 10 years into the future. So definitely follow very influential people.
And I would add to that, follow the researchers as well. So the ones that don't have
Yes.
as much financial stake in the game, AI economists of who I've been following over the past few months. And it's like, oh, this is a completely
Mhm.
different side than if I followed Sam Altman or somebody like that. Like you
Right.
get both sides of the coin, which I think is helpful for everybody. So, all right,
And
Julio,
most
thanks a
importantly,
ton.
you have to follow the audit podcast.
Thank you for listening, and be sure to follow the link to greenskiesanalytics.com in the show notes and schedule time to see how Green Skies can make the hype of AI a reality in your internal audit department.